At this point we're only days away from the release of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, sequel to 2019's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. A game that followed the Mantis crew and was, at least in my opinion, very heavily inspired by certain Star Wars Legends stories. That also happens to be the topic of today's video, but you already knew that because you have read the title. Spoilers going forward for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Jedi Battle Scars, the 90s Thrawn trilogy and Fate of the Jedi. I should note that this is all just based on my own assumptions, nothing of that is proof of anything, so take everything I say with a bit of a grain of salt, as they say. So let's start with the most obvious example. Taron Malicos shares many similarities with Jodor Sabayov. For starters, they look very similar, with both of them being oddly beefy older men with grey hair and beards. More importantly, there's a certain sense of insanity to both of them, as they rule as dictators on backwater planets, Dathomir and Wayland respectively. And they control a population with lies, fear, and at least in Sabayov's case, mind control. While neither of them is a Sith, both fall under the Dark Jedi umbrella, which was a pretty popular villain type back in the 90s, before the prequels expanded upon who or what the Sith themselves even were. They also both have visions of what the Jedi should be that are completely at odds with how Jedi are usually portrayed, even the less idealistic ones. And much like Jodor Sabayov, Taron Malicos tries to get other Force users to join him, and does not like taking no for an answer. Now let's move on to our protagonist, Cal Kestis. The obvious comparison for him is Luke Skywalker. First and foremost, of course, they are your typical goody two-shoes Jedi, and both of them are in conflict with not only the Empire, but in the story comparison specifically, the aforementioned Dark Jedi and a third or rather fourth party to which we'll get to in a minute. The similarities do not end there though. Each of them grew up without their real parents, as is Jedi tradition, but they also each lost their masters in someone else close to them, in the form of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, or in Cal Kestis' case, a scrapper named Prof. They are also at one point or another in conflict with a masked figure, but you know that's a pretty common problem to have in Star Wars, and that doesn't really count, does it? What's less common is that both of them seek to rebuild the Jedi Order after the Great Jedi Purge. While Cal has the guidance of Seer Thunder, Jaro Tapal's spirit, and Eno Cordova's messages, Luke does not have any to rely on. Even the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi bid him farewell at the beginning of Heir to the Empire. As such, he's initially slightly more open to learn from Sabayov than Cal is to learn from Taron Malicos. But to be fair, Luke had no way of knowing just how off the situation was, while Cal had been part of the old Jedi Order, even if just as a child. In time, however, they both find themselves very at odds with their respective old beefcake weirdo, and in both cases this leads to them teaming up with a woman who initially wants our Jedi dead or at the very least gone. And that leads us to Night Sister Marin and the former Emperor's Hand Mara Jade. Both of these women are initially introduced as antagonists with very personal reasons to hate our Jedi hero. And in both cases it is a rather one-sided hate because neither Luke nor Cal have any real desire nor reason to fight them. Yet despite their words and very unfriendly attitudes, neither woman actually ever makes a real effort to kill the Jedi. Marin leaves things up to chance once or twice, while circumstances dictate that Mara lets Luke, or others, talk her out of pulling the trigger, which she accepts as a good enough reason rather quickly. While both of them have a dark and bloody past and their late Dark Masters were quasi-parent figures for them, it is very quickly clear that these two are not what you could describe as evil. And while they're certainly rough around the edges, they manage to put differences aside and team up with the good guys in order to get rid of Sabayov and Malicos respectively. Both of them even landing the finishing blow, while the Jedi's hands stay relatively clean.
Try that again. What is this?
It's like you said, Malicos. Dathomir will be your grave.
Enough! Sabaya thundered. It doesn't matter what you think the lesser peoples need from me. I am the one who will decide that they will accept my rule or they will die. His eyes flashed. You had that choice, Jedi Skywalker, and more, you could have ruled beside me. Instead, you chose death. A drop of sweat or blood trickled down the side of Luke's face. What about Mara? Sabayev shook his head. Mara Jade is no longer any concern of yours, he said. I will deal with her later. No, Mara snapped. You will deal with me now. Shortly after, and with a certain level of doubt involved, they joined the heroes and built up a unique dynamic with each of them, reaching main character status rather quickly. Furthermore, there are subtle hints towards a romance between them and their Jedi in question. In both cases, the most explicit moment is nothing more than a prolonged touching of hands, and after that there are years they only spend as allies. In Mara and Luke's case, it took them 10 years to make a romantic relationship happen. We don't know yet how things will play out between Cal and Marin, but the novel Battle Scars drops further hints that a romance may just be in the cards in the future. Those three were the main parallels I wanted to point out, but wait, there's more. Number 1. Neither Dark Jedi is actually the main antagonist of the story, with Grand Admiral Thrawn and the second sister Trilla Suduri fulfilling the role. Two Imperial characters will find their lives cut short by the blade of a supposed ally. Number 2. Cal Kestis looks remarkably similar to Ben Skywalker, son of Luke and Mara, and guiding hand in the redemption story of Vestara Kai. Number 3. Much like Fallen Order, the fate of the Jedi series drew its very own parallels to the Thrawn trilogy. Vestara grew up in a lost society that had lacked the means of leaving their planet for a very long time. Much like Marin, Vestara features face markings, and unlike either Marin or Mara, she very clearly and almost immediately becomes the love interest of Ben Skywalker. However, her alliance with the Jedi is a lot more short-lived, at least initially. We don't know how her story would have ended, but if Force Visions are to be believed, she eventually ended up a Jedi by Ben Skywalker's side anyway. Number 4. In the 1998 PC game expansion Mysteries of the Sith for Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, the only way to win the final boss fight against Kyle Katarn is for Mara to turn off her lightsaber and let him make the decision not to attack her, mirroring the fight against Jaro Tapal. In conclusion, I think it's rather clear that the Dathomir subplot of Fallen Order is heavily inspired by the original Thrawn trilogy, which ran from 1991 to 1993, while the character designs and other smaller details have a lot in common with Fate of the Jedi, which ran from 2009 to 2012. It was also the last major storyline in the Legends timeline. Will Jedi Survivor continue to give us parallels to Star Wars books, Legends or otherwise? Possibly. The trailer revealed a potential antagonist to be found in a tank, and another trailer saw Marin talk some sense into Cal in a very Jedi way, which isn't only ironic, it is also something that happened at the Hand of Thrawn duology, which was Timothy Zahn's next project after the initial Thrawn trilogy. However, those details are not enough to convince me that there will be a deeper connection like in Fallen Order, which, and I'll say it again, may or may not be intentional in the first place. But that does it for this video. Have a good day and may the Force be with you.